Hey, everyone. Welcome to Locked on Lakers for Friday. Brian Kamenetsky and Andy Kamenetsky. Day one of free agency is in the books. The Lakers make four moves, but the biggest one may be to come as Kyrie Irving is back in the conversation. That's next on Locked on Lakers.
You are Locked on Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked on Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how you get your podcasts, where you get your podcasts. We always have fresh Lakers content up for you. Locked on Lakers on YouTube is where you go to get the podcast generally a little bit earlier than the straight audio version. And of course, breaking news like when the Lakers signed 4 free agents, as they did on the first day of free agency, Thursday evening. You go there and you get all that stuff. Andy, so much to get into in this show, including the day beginning before free agency even started with Kevin Durant requesting a trade from the Brooklyn Nets, which I guess KD on the radar perhaps for the Lakers and pie in the sky scenarios, but definitely puts Kyrie Irving back into things. So we will get to that. Yes. Trade rumor that will not die, that nobody can quit, Kyrie Irving to the Lakers. So we're going to get into that a lot before the end of the show. But before we do that, we should talk about what the Lakers actually did do today. They signed 4 players. The big money signing there, relatively speaking, is Lonnie Walker IV, sort of a shooting guard, small forward from the San Antonio Spurs. He gets 1 year at that taxpayer mid-level, about $6.5 million. Also, Juan Toscano-Anderson, forward from Golden State. Troy Brown, who had been with Chicago, another small forward. And then, who am I forgetting?
Damian Jones, the former Laker, played 8 games with the Lakers in the 2021 season. Shot this is not a typo, 94%, a robust 94% from the field in those 8 games. 16 of 17, the Lakers apparently held that one miss fiercely against him because they did not give him another 10-day.
Yes,
and fans remember they went eventually with Andre Drummond instead, but it's coming off a pretty good year with Sacramento. I think he is slated in all likelihood, although not in pen, to be a backup center.
One would think. Depends a lot on what kind of alignments they go with, whether or not Anthony Davis starts at the 5 or the 4 or whatever. He is not a Mo Bamba type stretch type 5 who can open up the floor for these guys, but as he showed, a decent pick and roll partner. And we should shout this out. If nothing else, this makes our friend, the former host of this show, Anthony Irwin, happy, because we all know how distressed he was when Damian Jones got away the first time. Before we get into the individual players themselves and kind of unpack them one by one and talk about, who we think helps the most, where the Lakers might have gone right or wrong, I want to talk first, though, about kind of the broad trends of what they did, because the first day of free agency this year was very different than what they did last year. Just for reference, the oldest player they signed was Toscano-Anderson, who just turned 29. So it is a young group, very different than last year at the very least.
The issues that the Lakers had are not going to be solved simply from younger legs, but it will be a very different dynamic on this team when you also combine THT, Kendrick Nunn, Austin Reeves, Stanley Johnson, Wenyen Gabriel, Max Christie. Like, assuming all these guys are on the team in this coming season, depending on what happens with either other moves, which a lot of people covering the team suspect there could be, the Kyrie rumors out there, which we're going to get into. They are setting themselves up for just a considerably younger team than what we've seen really since LeBron was playing with the kids.
Right. It is the jokes from last year won't apply this year. I think what they're doing, and it's interesting because younger does not automatically mean good. And there are always warning signs when a team does not hold on to their rookie scale players. They don't take a guy like Lonnie Walker in the case of San Antonio and make the qualifying offer that would make him a restricted free agent. They're doing that for a reason, and these are the teams that have seen these guys up close. The same situation with the Bulls and Troy Brown, but it was the same situation with the Malik Monk last year coming away from Charlotte. And what I think the Lakers are doing, and I like it kind of in principle, is they are saying, okay, guys are flawed. We just went out and hired Chris Gent. We have Phil Handy on our schedule. These are two of the most well-respected development guys in the NBA. And what we're going to do
been a player development guy.
Yes. Instead of kind of betting, looking with floor or whatever might be, you could argue with veterans like consistency. We know they're hoping to find guys that pop. And I think that as a strategy that makes sense, because the gap that the Lakers need to fill with their supporting cast is really big. And so you have to take some big swings and hope that young players can mature and develop in ways that maybe they hadn't before. And look, there's a reason some of these guys are available. You're not going to find perfect players for 1.8 million, or whatever it is, or 6.5 at the taxpayer mid. It's just not going to be able to happen.
No. And, in the case of, say, Lonnie Walker or Troy Brown, you're talking about former, just either lottery picks or just outside the lottery picks. So, these are players that had a certain amount of expectations. And I think sometimes the royal we, whether you're talking about media, whether you're talking about fans, maybe even players themselves, sometimes I think forget just how hard it can often be for players drafted in the high teens, low 20s to carve out a career in the NBA. Like, guys can start becoming really interchangeable in those spots. And
right, you're not quite that sort of late round pick that have, where the expectations are lower, but you're also not quite those guys who are, drafted in the top 10 for a reason. Like,
to quote Britney Spears, not a girl, not yet a woman. That's I mean,
you should run that when we have with the Troy Brown introductory press conference. You should run that one by him.
Hi, Troy, Locked on Lakers, Andy Kamenetsky. Do you consider yourself not a girl, not yet a woman? Hello. Hello.
Well,
clearly the mic isn't.
What if he's
working.
like a huge Britney Spears? What if he's a huge Britney Spears fan?
My relationship with all my teams has been toxic. He just starts throwing out all these different Britney Spears lines. See what I did there?
I see what you did there.
My wife loves Britney Spears, so I hear a lot of it.
I don't sweat Britney. So, but the other thing though, that, for they did solve the youth thing. They went much younger this time than last. As a collective, they did not solve the shooting thing. I saw a bunch of comments on Twitter to the effect of the Lakers are going to be the first team to ever play 4 in, 1 out. They didn't pick up a lot of shooting. Like, even the guys that you could squint and maybe see some shooting stats there aren't very good. So
yeah, we're gonna get into these guys individually, and it's a very interesting and specific thing to the Lakers in terms of grading how they've done so far, because I don't think, and I need to see where other guys who we thought might be taxpayer mid-level exception guys eventually go, and for how much money, how long
for what it's worth. Players that we talk about, Hartenstein, Mo Bamba, Malik Monk,
out of the price
all
range.
Very quickly went for above what the Lakers could pay.
But what either Martin Twin goes for or Otto Porter Jr., like where they end up, and also what other moves could be down the pike. But none of these moves that the Lakers made today, I think, represent a terrible decision in a vacuum. And you acknowledge the fact that they were working from a position of weakness in terms of flexibility and resources, also acknowledging they are the ones that put themselves in that box to begin with. But at some point, you have to evaluate where you are as opposed to just beating the dead horse on how you got there. Like, they always have to be accountable for it, but at some point, this is the reality. I don't necessarily strongly dislike any of the moves they've made, other than maybe Walker at that taxpayer mid-level.
Right, we'll talk about that in a second.
I'm reserving the right.
I'm
reserving the right
yeah.
until it gets done, or until we see the team in full. But I'm not sure how much they really helped themselves. I'm not sure how much they could have helped themselves.
Right. Let's talk about these guys individually. I'm interested in who you think is the best player, the best move that they made today. I'm interested in what you think is worst. I mean, and how you think some of these guys will fit in, how much you think, at least the way things are shaping up right now, how important some of these guys are going to be. So we'll do all of that next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by Arcade 1-Up. The only NBA Jam is back. Arcade 1-Up, the leader in home retro arcade games, is not only bringing back the best game ever, but it is bigger than ever with a Shaq Edition machine. One of the first sports games to ever feature real and digitized NBA licensed team. No fouls, no free throws, and this time no quarters required. Compete with family and friends through an all-new Wi-Fi leaderboard. Pre-order now from arcade1up.com. That's arcade1up.com for an estimated early September ship date. Arcade 1-Up is the place for fun. They've got classics like Golden Tee, Mortal Kombat, and others starting at just $399. And they are, this is cool, pay attention, they are giving away an NBA Shaq Edition to a Locked On listener. Enter for a chance to win a game console for your man cave at arcade1up.com/lockedon. That's arcade, up.com/lockedon. You've got until July 8th to enter to win NBA Jam, the Shaq Edition console. Don't miss out. Enter today. Who are you going to play with?
All right, to review, Juan Toscano-Anderson, forward, Troy Brown Jr., forward, Lonnie Walker Jr., forward, Lonnie Walker fourth. After there's a lot of the juniors and fourths, Lonnie Walker the fourth, and then
Damian Jones.
The center. So of those moves, like which of these excited you the most, relatively speaking?
Juan Toscano-Anderson. First of all, I think he comes the closest to filling an area of direct need, being a guy that is clearly a wing player in the NBA. He can guard multiple positions, but particularly he can guard threes and fours. He's got a lot of experience in a really good, smart developmental culture. He is somebody who has busted his ass to get where he is right now. Like, people should read up on Juan Toscano-Anderson. Our friend Marcus Thompson over at The Athletic has a terrific, basically say goodbye to Juan Toscano-Anderson Warriors fans piece up about just everything that he's gone to get through, to get where he is right now and establish himself in the league. He's known as a terrific locker room guy. I think he's going to be really good for those periods in January and February where guys are having a little bit of trouble motivating themselves to get up. He apparently was great during the playoffs when he was out of his out of the rotation, just a consummate teammate. And I think he's going to be really useful for this team. And I did not think he would go for that cheap.
No, I didn't either. Although, you sort of break down the numbers. He's one of those guys who, like, from a price standpoint, is somebody going to pay for what they think he could be, for the contributions he, on a lesser team, he would have played more. Golden State was really good. I think the question with Toscano-Anderson is sort of, where is he? Because, he only played 13 games as a rookie a couple years ago. So throw that out. His second season in Golden State, played 53 games. He started 16 of them. He shot, low volume, no question, but he shot 40% from 3-point range. He was at 58% from two overall, and all that kind of stuff. And that was when he kind of burst onto the scene with a really bad, struggling, injury-riddled Warriors team, but showed some utility. This year he was, or I guess we should call it last year now, whatever it is, the one they just played. He played 73 games, played about 13 and a half, 14 minutes a night. The field goal percentage went down to about 49%. The 3-point percentage went down to 32%. The rest of the numbers were sort of similar on a per minute basis. But, there's a big difference between a guy like that who shooting 40% from three and 32% from three. And so where is that kind of middle ground if he gets more minutes? And the Lakers right now don't have a lot of wings. I mean, we've already established that. So the path to playing time, depending on what happens, is there for a guy like Toscano-Anderson. So you wonder, which guy he is, but culturally he'll be great. Locker room, he'll be great. Does a lot of things well, very coachable, does all of those little things because he is a dude who wants to stay in the league. All of that I love. And as a kind of an added bonus, it's kind of cool to have a Mexican player on the Lakers playing in LA. Like, you want to talk about a guy who's just going to be, he's instantly going to be very popular. He's a cult hero in Oakland. He's going to be just as popular down here. So I mean, from whatever it is, $1.8 million, whatever, $2 million, whatever it is for the minimum that he gets, totally cool with this pickup. I just wish he could shoot a little more, but we'll see. Maybe if the middle ground is 36%, that's a big difference. Cool there. I really like the Jones signing. As we all know, like you said, he never missed when he was with the Lakers. If he could keep that up, it's going to be really impressive. But I like he fills a very obvious need with skill sets that are very specific to that. He's good around the rim finishing. He'll be a good roll man, similar to JaVale McGee, kind of like that. Good rim protector, good rebounder, limited in some ways, so you got to use him properly. But in the same way that JaVale thrived in that, championship season, I think you can get similar performance and activity from Damian Jones. And at a minimum, with, I believe, a player option for the second year, it's a great, that's a great. So it may not work, but like that makes tons of sense. I loved that one.
It's the contract that they kept giving, like Rajon Rondo, or maybe, if memory serves, JaVale McGee, like giving these guys some flexibility, and also the team some flexibility as well. A couple numbers that jumped out at me with Damian Jones. I had happened to have a link to a stat item when I was doing a little bit of research on Hartenstein, when he had been more directly linked to the Lakers before going to the Knicks, and saw that his defensive percentage for players defending shots 6 feet or closer to the basket, with 300 minimum attempts, and that ranking, Jones didn't have 300 minimum, but I took away that qualifier and looked him up. His was at 59%, like team shooting 59% at that range, and 138 out of 234, and per cleaning the glass, roughly that range put him in the 76th percentile defending in that region. So that was good. The other thing that I noticed was the season that he was with the Lakers, where he was like basically unstoppable at the rim. He blocked 2.3 shots per 36 minutes, but he also would have fouled out in every game. Like, he averaged 7.1 fouls per 36 minutes.
It's going to be hard to put him and Wenyen Gabriel on the floor at the same time.
And that had been a pattern in his entire career to that point. He'd been extremely foul prone. This previous season, the one that he just finished in Sacramento, he dramatically cut down that foul count. It was 4.6 per 36 minutes, which is totally acceptable for really any big man, but for a backup center in particular. If he can manage to keep that up, and maybe it helped that he felt like he was going to be in Sacramento all year, he wasn't as like eager to prove himself, maybe a little less jumpy, that sort of thing, like literally and figuratively. But I thought that was a really potentially good sign with Jones moving forward.
Yeah. So, I mean, Troy Brown is an interesting one. I mean, looked like in his second year in Washington, like he might be kind of breaking out, fell back in that rotation again the year following, ends up in Chicago, doesn't really work out there. Again, we're talking about minimum level guys. He's not a shooter. He's, got a pretty limited offensive game, but he's a legit wing. He's, 6'6", and is, by reputation, at least a pretty solid defender.
The numbers that I looked up, real quick, the numbers I looked up in Chicago, defensive stats, broadly speaking, the defense did not really get better or considerably worse with him on the floor, for what that's worth.
Right. So, I mean, I think that's going to be a bit of a wait and see, but he's young. He's not considered a great athlete for a young player, but, it's all relative. The most interesting player here, and before we get to Kyrie, is Lonnie Walker, because that's where they spent their most money. It's the opportunity that they had to spend the most money. They only went 1 year with it. And Walker, to me, is in a lot of ways kind of a taller, which matters, version of Malik Monk, in the sense that he's a guy who can attack the rack. He's got kind of a decent offensive game, good athlete, underperformed in a lot of ways, but he cannot shoot. As his volume has gone up from distance, his shooting has dropped off a cliff. So Lakers have to hope some of that. Last year, I think it was about 32%. That has to really bounce back up. And he is a god-awful defender. So there's work to be done here. Maybe some potential, but there's a lot of work to be done. And I can't say that I'm super excited about this one.
Yeah, I am going to fully hold out my judgment until I see what the team truly looks like.
Right.
You know, if they
and who
trade
else
for Kyrie,
ends up signing in that $6 million range.
Right. There are a few things that I need to see before I really decide it. That being said, my initial instinct is I don't like it for that, for the biggest bullet that the Lakers could fire resource wise. It feels redundant with what they already have. It's interesting reading up on him at a few other places, including Pounding the Rock, a really good Spurs blog. They've been doing it for a long time. Reading one piece they had for basically his goodbye. Quote, the Lakers make sense for Walker, even if the contract, almost exactly the same in terms of money and years he would have gotten by signing the qualifying offer in San Antonio, seems low. LeBron James's team lost bench scorer Malik Monk to the Kings in free agency and needed a replacement. Walker should fit that role, and for a fraction of what Monk is making, I wouldn't necessarily call it a fraction, but surrounded by two stars and a dominant ball handler like Westbrook, Lonnie should be able to pick his spots on offense instead of trying to create his shots, which should help his efficiency. If the three-point shot returns to his career averages and the potential to make a deep postseason run motivates him to try on defense, he could end up being a bargain. If things don't work out, he gets to re-enter free agency in a year. So I think that supports, Brian, a lot of what we've both been saying. Yeah,
and it's like, did you need to do that on, within the first hour of the first day? Like, I don't know. And I don't root against anybody, and certainly I don't root against guys that they just signed. And Walker, as we'll get on in the summer, has a kind of a fascinating and impressive story in a lot of ways. But there's a lot of if there. And as much I talked about Gent, and I talked about Handy, and I talked about the Lakers have good development staff and all that kind of stuff, and Darvin Ham, whatever. It's not like he's coming from a place where they don't develop players. And San Antonio takes player development obviously very seriously. They are in a full rebuild, and they still let him go, and that to me is a red flag.
Well, I mean, speaking of red flags, or at least perceived red flags, it is worth noting that Walker is a clutch guy. And
aren't they all?
I don't know if they
except for Damian Jones.
Damian Jones is not a clutch guy, but Juan Toscano-Anderson is a clutch guy.
Toscano-Anderson is a clutch guy. Troy Brown is a clutch guy.
Right. And Walker is a clutch guy. And if Walker does not work out, when you combine, Kendrick Nunn, I believe, is a clutch guy. I know THT is a clutch guy. And the perception of, the Lakers putting themselves in a, granted, self-imposed financial decision. Rich Paul does not tell them you can only spend X amount of money and not $1 more. That is not up to Rich Paul. But the perception that the clutch influence might have led them to use that to break the tie between THT and Caruso, even though Caruso was far readier to contribute to a championship level team than THT. This group of signings, but particularly Walker, if it does not work, and again, I mean, I'm not saying this is what happened. If nothing else, it's been too soon after the signings for me to have really dug in to know how much of that influenced, if at all. But it will continue that perception, fair or not.
Yeah. All right, next, let's get into the elephant in the room. Kyrie Irving, the rumor mill has spun around 360 degrees or 180 degrees, or whatever the number is. That means we're back to talking about Kyrie Irving as a potential Laker. So we'll get into that next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including baseball, boxing, MMA, NFL futures, NBA futures, and much, much more. If you had happened to put down a little action on the NBA 2K23 cover athlete, because they had been offering odds for that, and you said, you know what? Let's just shoot the works at 33-1 for Devin Booker. Congratulations, sir or madam, because you won yourself a pretty nice bounty on that. BetOnline is your continued source. You got a max deal, too, on top of it. It's a very good day today, free agency opening for Devin Booker. BetOnline, your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. So head to the website today or use your mobile device. Learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the games start.
All right, very excited again to talk about our new partner for Locked On Lakers. They are Duer, D-U-E-R. These guys make the most incredible clothes. Andy's got one of the Duer t-shirts on. Andy, I'm wearing the adventure pants. These are my pants. They are incredibly comfortable. They are incredibly versatile. What I love about them, too, they are staple items in your wardrobe. If you're somebody like me, you don't want to have 8,000 different pairs of pants and 8,000 different shirts. You want a few really reliable, really good-looking things that you can wear anywhere that you need to go, whether it's to the office, if you're back in the office, if you're running around the playground with your kids, if you're going on a hike, whatever it is, Duer has clothes that can adapt to your lifestyle wherever it is you're going on any given day. I really, it's very cool that we get to actually talk about and wear clothes that we like. And it is no joke. We're big on these things. I got the jeans, I got the Live Free Adventure pants, which I'm wearing right now. I just showed you the No Sweat joggers. And if you go to 170 South La Brea Avenue in Mid-City, 90036, or Duer.com, Duer.com, use the exclusive 15% off discount code LOCKEDON15. Again, Duer.com, or walk into the store, feel the stuff, try it on if you're in LA. LOCKEDON15 to get 15% off. Again, Duer, Duer, Duer.com. The zombie rumor of the summer. It cannot be killed. It is The Walking Dead. We thought it was gone, Andy, but then Kevin Durant said that he is wants out of Brooklyn, and if he wants out of Brooklyn, that likely means that Kyrie Irving is also going to be out of Brooklyn. We could, I guess, dabble with the idea that maybe Kevin Durant would be a possibility for LA. That really comes very difficult to put together. But Kyrie is 100% by all reports, even some reports saying that he's going to try to force his way here. Kyrie is back on the table. Your thoughts? Like, this is a thing again.
It's so insane. It is absolutely insane that we are here again. I mean, it's not surprising. And there had been emphasized by a lot of people who cover the NBA at large or cover the Nets specifically that things were not settled, so to speak, just because Kyrie opted into his deal, because he clearly didn't want to be there. He just also clearly did not want to light $30 million on fire after he spent last season lighting assorted other bunches of money on fire. So the idea that things were going to be smooth moving forward, I don't think anybody necessarily expected that, but it really all was hinging on Durant. What I think is interesting about this is, first of all, just how quickly Brooklyn wants to make this happen. Because, the Durant thing, Kevin Durant's under contract for 4 more years, and I don't believe has any opt-outs. So, while there always is that threat of, do you really want an unhappy Kevin Durant showing up? It's like, same time, how much longer, how many times does Kevin Durant want to position himself as the disgruntled guy? Like, how many times?
And I do think he is. I think he is more likely than, say, like a James Harden or a Ben Simmons or something. I think he will be better about showing up and playing, at least, and trying to work with Brooklyn to get him to a place he wants to go. I mean, that's part of it too. It's like, he doesn't want to be traded just anywhere. And it is a tricky thing to take a guy who's going to command a huge price and get him to a place where he can actually win a title, which is where he wants to go. So it certainly is in everyone's interest to try to work together and find a good ending for everyone. or at least as good as possible. But Kyrie is kind of a different deal because he only has one more year left on his contract, and he isn't as sought after a commodity in the NBA because of all the stuff that you talked about. And so the price actually could end up pretty different. And depending on what, I think Durant will get lined up and traded first, but I could be wrong. And I mean, maybe they just want to move off this Kyrie thing as quickly as possible so that they can move on to Kevin Durant. I don't know, but
I don't know. I mean, here's the weird thing about the Nets. For people who don't know, like they, like the Lakers, have very little control over future picks, assuming ones that they haven't even traded away. Like they have no incentive to tank. They also don't have to worry about their record either. So in certain respects, like the idea of Kyrie, Durant, both of them, either of them, threatening to sit out, in certain respects, Brooklyn's answer can be, and okay, like, you know, you want to take a bunch of fines to do this, take a bunch of fines to do this. Like, you know, Philadelphia, for example, last year had an amount of pressure to figure out the Ben Simmons situation because they were built to contend right there. And Joel Embiid was having an MVP caliber season. You know, Brooklyn last season was trying to salvage what they thought was going to be a championship run. And they had all this mess with Kyrie and the vaccination and, you know, Durant getting hurt and all this different stuff. So they had to worry about their season too. Brooklyn, I don't think they have to make any moves through a position of fear. Certainly not right away.
Right.
So, you know,
agree with that.
They can afford to wait this out a little bit, because what's the worst thing that happens if KD and Kyrie threaten not to play? My response is going to be like, okay, fine, whatever.
And, you know, KD's KD, but Kyrie is taking a big chance if he doesn't show up and play, because
yes, he is.
You know, you're talking about a guy now who, you know, what, 3 seasons in a row isn't going to be on the floor. Like, you start to wonder a little bit, and if a little bit more, I should say, because the wonder has already begun. What I just think is amazing about this is, like, there is a more live possibility now that the Lakers could end up just kind of, you know, it's got its own problems, but the idea that you could get out of the Westbrook thing and just put yourself in a year of Kyrie, because they can't extend. We're correct, like they can't extend him.
No,
for like,
I don't believe so. No,
not for a while at least. Like, that is as good of an ending to this problem as you could possibly hope for.
Sure.
Even if you have to throw in a first, or even if it costs you another player, and the money and all that kind of stuff, figure it out. But I would do a first, even for, you know, Kyrie on the 1 year. I would throw in a first for that, because Kyrie, from a basketball standpoint, is so much better as a fit there, so much better to play around LeBron and AD, that if they, by some miracle, all 3 of them could stay healthy enough, you actually are giving yourself a better puncher's chance at contention than you otherwise would. And I happen to think that Kyrie is going to be on his best behavior this year, because he wants to get paid next year.
I mean, maybe he will be, maybe he won't be, but given the issues that are going to be there with Russ, even if Russ has the best possible attitude about this coming season, there's just certain things he's not going to
turn him into a 40% 3-point shooter,
right,
like Kyrie Irving.
Exactly. Give up Russ and first for 1 year. I mean, it is your best opportunity to, like you said, get yourself out of this hole. You know, I would not be desperate to make it happen, and I would still treat your assets as important, just because you only have so few to try to make a different move. But right. 1 year of Kyrie, sure, no problem.
As Homer Simpson once said, I got to get out of this rut and back into the groove.
Exactly.
That's where the Lakers are. The NBA is a crazy place.
Do you think it's going to happen real quick?
I kind of do. I kind of do think at this point that I don't know when. I don't know when, and I think it could take a while, but I kind of do. Just because there's a sort of Thanos quality to it at this point. Like, doesn't matter where we go, the answer still to be, and this seems to be where he wants to go. I think the market for him is going to be relatively limited because of all the stuff we were talking about, all waves hands around, and the Lakers actually have a thing that they could send back that theoretically helps them a little bit clearing cap space and all that kind of stuff, more cap space than they otherwise would with just Kyrie. Russ makes more money. So, yeah, I don't know exactly what this looks like in the end, but I kind of feel like it's going to happen. I kind of do.
So do I.
It's very unusual. It's a strange place to be.
We'll see. We both thought Paul George was going to be a Laker, so you never know.
And we didn't think Russell Westbrook would be.
Nope, we did not. We advised strongly against it.
Nobody called to ask. Nope. All right, Locked On Lakers. You know what we didn't even get into was some of the stuff, and we'll do this either for next week. All the comments from Brian Windhorst early on Thursday about LeBron James and whether or not he would want to sign an extension, kind of keep that year-to-year leverage, whether or not LeBron can do that. We didn't even have time for that. LeBron James did not make his way into this show, so crowded it was. But we'll get to that next week. Of course, if the Lakers do anything on Friday of significance, we'll certainly, we'll do something. For you fine people. Next week's going to be pretty interesting as well as the roster starts to fill out. A very exciting day on Thursday. More to come for sure. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you go to get the podcast a little early and to see our faces while we do it. Doer.com, DUER. Locked On 15 is where you go to get the most comfortable pants in the entire world. And we'll see everybody next time.